From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I am Doris Polo. Iran's President Hassan Rouhani has warned the United States government that it will receive a decisive response for the assassination of top Iranian military commander Qasem Soleimani. Speaking during a cabinet meeting on Wednesday, Rouhani said his country will not stop until Soleimani is avenged, despite threats from United States President Donald Trump. He also urged nations in the Middle East to honor the late commander by expelling U.S. forces from their territories.
We don't retreat in the face of America. If America has committed a crime, it should know that it would receive a decisive response. America must receive the main response from the nations of the region. They cut off the hand of our dear Soleimani. The revenge for him is to cut off America's feet from this region.
Hours later, President Donald Trump held a conference in which he threatened more powerful sanctions on Iran for Tuesday's missile strike on Iraqi military bases hosting U.S. troops.
As we continue to evaluate options in response to Iranian aggression, the United States will immediately impose additional punishing economic sanctions on the Iranian regime. These powerful sanctions will remain until Iran changes its behavior.
In the early hours of Wednesday, Iran's Revolutionary Guard launched 2 waves of ballistic missile strikes at the Ain al-Assad Air Base, a military installation in Iraq hosting hundreds of U.S. troops. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps confirmed that the attack was carried out in retaliation for the assassination by the U.S. of top Iranian commander Qasem Soleimani at the Baghdad International Airport last week. Reports state that the Ain al-Assad Air Base was hit by anywhere between 15 and 22 missiles. After the attack, Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei said that a slap to the face was delivered to the United States.
This great warrior, this great leader in the fight against terrorism, our enemy tries to call him a terrorist. Americans who are unjust, Americans who are liars, Americans who are bullies, Americans whose word means nothing. They tried to do this. Iran hit them in the face. Last night, a slap in the face was delivered.
Addressing reporters, Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif said the expulsion of the United States from the region will be his country's revenge.
America is experiencing its final days in this region. It certainly will have no future in this region. And this is the real result of the sacrifice of the blood of our beloved Qasem Soleimani, that the foothold of America in this region will be cut.
In some devastating news, a Ukraine International Airlines plane burst into flames shortly after takeoff in Tehran on Wednesday, killing all 176 people on board. Ukraine's embassy in Iran said the cause of the accident have yet to be disclosed, although initial reports blamed an engine failure. The Boeing 737 had departed the Imam Khomeini International Airport before dawn, headed for the Ukrainian capital Kiev, before crashing into farmland at Kalazhabdad, about 45 kilometers northwest of the airport. Debris and smoldering parts from the plane were found across the field as rescue workers retrieved the bodies.
On behalf of our company, I offer deep condolences to the families of the people who were on board, to everyone close to them. It was one of our best planes, with an excellent, trustworthy crew.
According to preliminary information, the list of passengers is now being verified, but preliminarily, there were 167 passengers and 9 crew members on board. Of the 167 passengers, 2 were Ukrainian citizens, the rest were Canadian, Iranians, Germans, Swedes and Afghans.
Puerto Rico's governor, Wanda Vasquez, has declared a state of emergency and activated the National Guard after a series of earthquakes, including one of magnitude 6.4, hit the country. At least one person was killed as buildings were severely damaged, cars flattened and power knocked out across much of the island. Schools were closed on Wednesday and all public employees except police and health workers stayed home as engineers checked the safety of buildings.
The events which we have experienced, we have communicated with the United States Geological Survey, and they have informed us that this type of movement may continue for the next few days. We must be prepared and we must have our individual and family plans so that in the case that these events recur, we are prepared.
I feel there is a feeling of panic because we are expecting something stronger to happen, something worse and really. There is a feeling of instability and panic with people here from this town.
In the hard-hit south of the island, residents moved beds outside on Tuesday and slept outdoors, fearful their homes would crumble if another earthquake hit. Around 750 people spent the night in shelters in southern towns, and a 73-year-old man died after a wall fell on him.
Many apartments collapsed. Everything was lost in some houses. That's why took shelter in the parking lot. We have 3 camps located here in the community parking lot.
A collision between a cargo train and bus in the Mexican state of Sonora has killed 7 people and injured more than 30. According to the railway company, the accident happened after the bus driver ignored a stop sign at a rail crossing. Most of the victims were agriculture workers on their way to work. Venezuelan Foreign Minister Jorge Rodriguez has held a meeting with Cuba's Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez in the framework of the Summit of the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States that is set to take place later on Wednesday in Mexico City. Rodriguez took to Twitter to confirm the meeting and said, quote, "Our peoples and leaders will always compromise to Latin American integration and peace in our region. Long live Cuba, long live Venezuela." Among the issues at hand during the summit are regional integration, consensus on the coup in Bolivia, the upcoming elections at the Organization of American States, and the situation in Venezuela. Coming up, a call for peace in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Stay with us for details. Welcome back. The U.S. blockade against Venezuela has now affected the nation's insulin supply. But President Nicolas Maduro assures that with the help of Russia and Cuba, citizens suffering from diabetes will receive their medication.
También para los pacientes diabéticos.
We are assuring diabetic patients that they will receive insulin that has arrived from Russia. We will take care of them. We are also trying to find a permanent solution for diabetic patients and those who have food problems as a result of the disease. We are treating them thanks to Cuban medicine. We thank Raúl Castro, the President Miguel Díaz-Canel, the spirit of Fidel Castro, and all Cuban doctors.
Staying in Venezuela, the President of the Constituent Assembly, Diosdado Cabello, has called on citizens to march for peace on Tuesday, following the latest acts by opposition figure Juan Guaidó. Cabello said nationals must resist those who want to engage in violent acts and cause anarchy.
On Tuesday, we have called a great march for peace in Venezuela. This Tuesday, Darío Vivas, a great march and concentration for the peace of our country. We are not going to give them the pleasure of taking us to war. If they want, they can fight each other.
Now, yesterday, Venezuelan opposition figure Juan Guaidó was the star of the latest media show to take place outside the National Assembly building. As the legislative body held its first ordinary session of the year, the division between the country's opposition was on full display.
This is how the first ordinary session of the year of the National Assembly occurred under the new leadership elected on January 5th.
We will not let the Venezuelan people down. We will move forward, past the extremists, to work for national reconciliation and to save this legislative body.
This is the democratic opposition that wants to coexist with the government, but the other side of the opposition had a plan to further destabilize matters. They gave the green light for the start of the media show. 4 lawmakers, accompanied by the corporate media, entered the legislative building. Curiously, they headed for the press room. Their mission was to shout at the lawmakers below, who were holding a legitimate session, claiming there was no quorum. Suddenly, one of these people tried to attack a lawmaker. But this was all a preamble before supporters of Juan Guaidó arrived to further agitate the situation. Authorized lawmakers were allowed to enter with no issues.
Why are you not coming in? We have given you access. Why do you want to come in? You just want to bring a number of people who have no authorization to be here.
These lawmakers claimed the security forces were acting illegally by not letting one of the self-proclaimed authorities enter, who was sworn in the offices of a newspaper. Their intention was to abruptly set up an illegal assembly. They say Guaidó was accompanied by 100 lawmakers outside the building, but in the session inside, there were 86 lawmakers present. In the National Assembly, there's a total of 167 lawmakers, so something was off. Among those standing with Guaidó were lawmakers from Amazonas State, whose credentials were suspended back in 2017 by the Supreme Electoral Court due to fraud. While nobody was stopping the lawmakers from entering, their strategy was to put on a show and claim the National Guard had attacked them, once again in search of a good picture. Reactions from the people present came fast. After his second media show in 3 days, Juan Guaidó entered as if nothing had happened. But what came next was somehow worse. After entering, Guaidó and his allies started running after the newly elected president of the National Assembly, Luis Parra. Their objective is unknown.
They do not want to have dialogue. Once again, they resorted to violence. We want to tell them that their way is deemed to fail. We will not rest until they can see reason, because violence no longer has any future in Venezuela.
Chavista lawmakers were barely able to witness the circus.
What happened here was truly regrettable and embarrassing. Right-wing groups are literally trying to kill each other.
While they cry about a coup, that is exactly what they try to do here today.
Forcefully, these lawmakers entered the building. In less than 1 year, Juan Guaidó once again proclaimed himself president of Venezuela and was illegally sworn in. After their show was over and they left, the constitutionally elected leadership came back to give the people of Venezuela a message of hope and continue the way forward towards peace and stability.
In some Caribbean news, the Antigua-based regional carrier Liat has decided to delay the recommendation by the Caribbean Development Bank to lower ticket fares by 25%. At a recent meeting, shareholder governments opted for a 2-year extension. The CDB conducted a study which found that lower taxes and charges will lead to cheaper airfares and stimulate passenger demand. However, Antigua and Barbuda Prime Minister Gaston Brown ruled out hopes of an immediate reduction in airline taxes. He is willing to consider a phased approach to airline tax reduction. Guyana's presidential candidate under the Change Guyana Party, Robert Badal, has promised that citizens will own shares in a national oil company established to manage revenue from crude sales. That is, if he wins the upcoming general elections.
Every citizen of Guyana will be assigned shares in the national oil company from birth. Such shares would appreciate in value with every auction and every sign-in bonus. Sales of these shares may only be disposed to one's family or the national oil company. No speculation in these shares. This will give every Guyanese a stake in our oil resources and the benefits therefrom.
A measles outbreak in the DR Congo has killed more than 6,000 people since January 2019, the World Health Organization has reported. The outbreak is considered to be the world's worst one and has claimed more lives than the Ebola epidemic that has received more media attention. A vaccination program for children has already started in Goma district, and the WHO has requested an additional 40 million in emergency funds to help curb the epidemic.
Those who come in sick are treated for free. We get about 3 to 5 children who have contact measles every day. We have the medicines to treat them.
I heard that measles is killing children, and that is why I brought my 6 children to be vaccinated.
Millions of Indians have once again taken to the streets, this time against the government's economic policies. Workers are protesting the privatization of state-run companies, which they fear will result in further job losses. Government employees did not participate in the strike after being threatened with disciplinary action. This is the latest demonstration against the government, as protests have rocked the country for weeks over a citizenship law and the National Register of Citizens deemed anti-Muslim. Moving on, following a number of popular protests late last year, Panamanian citizens are still calling for the withdrawal of proposed constitutional reforms and for the creation of a constituent assembly.
A new legislative period kicked off in the National Assembly. Although the proposed constitutional reforms were withdrawn, citizens continued to protest against them.
Here in Panama, we are fighting a very difficult battle against the political and economic power that is trying to take hold of our constitution. They haven't done their job, which is to listen to the people of Panama.
After weeks of student protests, President Laurentino Cortizo announced that the proposed reforms would be withdrawn and a dialogue table would be set up to discuss the matter with protesters.
We withdrew the reforms, and I asked the United Nations Development Program to be mediators in a national dialogue process. But as Panamanians, we need to strengthen the 3 state bodies through constitutional reforms.
However, social movements say they don't trust the United Nations Development Program. Protesters continue demanding that reforms are made through a constituent assembly.
We reject all the reforms and the intervention of the agency that doesn't represent the interests of the nation. We believe a serious dialogue is possible, but it needs to be based on the interests of the people, not of the corrupt oligarchy that has carried out the process so far.
Social sectors in Panama are calling for constitutional reforms that will end inequality and allow every citizen to benefit from the country's resources.
We'll take one last break. When we return, a bomb attack has claimed several lives in Somalia. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin have called for a ceasefire in Libya starting midnight January 12th, following their meeting in Istanbul this Wednesday.
I want to highlight the appeal of Russian and Turkish president addressed to all sides of the conflict in Libya to stop combat actions immediately, to declare a ceasefire from midnight of Sunday, January the 12th, that is Saturday night into Sunday.
At least 4 people have been killed and 10 wounded after a car bomb explosion in Somalia. The blast happened near the Parliament building in Mogadishu, destroying a number of vehicles around the area. Militant armed group Al-Shabaab has claimed responsibility for the attack. This comes only a week after 90 people were killed in Mogadishu in a similar attack carried out by the same group. Botswana's Court of Appeal has ruled in favor of hearing an opposition bid to throw out the results of the recently held elections. The ruling Botswana Democratic Party won 38 out of 57 seats in the October polls. The Umbrella for Democratic Change won 15 seats and had unsuccessfully disputed the results in a lower court in November last year. But the petition was rejected due to a lack of evidence. The appeal will be heard on January 29th. China wants to achieve the African dream. That is what Chinese Foreign Minister recently announced. Wang Yi is currently on a tour of Africa to review his country's cooperation agreements with various nations.
This is the 13th consecutive time that a Chinese foreign minister visits Africa at the beginning of the year. Wang Yi will travel to Egypt, Djibouti, Eritrea, Burundi, and Zimbabwe with the aim of strengthening relations with the African continent.
This tradition reflects how China gives great importance to the development of relations with Africa. It is a strong evidence that China and Africa enjoy a great friendship that has consolidated over time.
The links between Beijing and African nations have grown significantly, especially after the China-Africa Cooperation Forum. In the coming years, China will invest more than $69 billion in sectors like education, health, connectivity, and infrastructure.
China and Africa cooperation is increasing day by day, and they are making tie in different sectors and in different aspects, like in diplomacy, in strategic cooperation, in trade and investment, in technology and people-to-people relationship. So when we see one by one in diplomacy and strategic cooperation, China and Africa have been cooperating for so long, like Africa Union and the President of China, Xi Jinping, has been talking on the principles of good values and good faith, sincerity between nations of Africa and China. Moreover, like on trade and investment, the cooperation between Africa and China has been developing very fast, and China has been opening their market for Africa for the benefit of Africa.
In Europe, a new colonization from China to Africa is being talked about. Nonetheless, Beijing and the 54 countries of the continent reassured that the objective is to build a relationship based on respect and the win-win principle.
The technological benefit from that Africa is gaining from China is so broad and so large. In that regard, since the fund is provided by the Chinese government, and it is Africans and African leaders, it is we Africans who should consider how to utilize the best from the opportunity, because it is not the priority for Chinese government to consider the cause or the negative impact on Africa, because China already opened the market, China already provided the fund and the opportunity, technological market, and the employment opportunity for Africans. For that, the Chinese government or anyone should not be criticized. I think the Africans should consider how to utilize the best from that opportunity.
China has also added the African nations to the Belt and Road Initiative as other way of contributing to the continent's development.
And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Doris Polo. Thank you for watching.